The afternoon sun baked the asphalt of Crestwood's main boulevard, turning it into a wavy, shimmering ribbon. Officer Dale Brickner sat in the cooled bubble of his patrol car, one arm resting on the doorframe. He'd been on this stretch for years. He knew its rhythms, its people, and in his view, its problems. His eyes, pale blue and narrowed from decades of squinting through windshields, scanned the traffic with automatic ease. He wasn't looking for speeders just then. He was looking for what he called the disconnect. That's when he saw it. A low, predatory shape in matte black, sliding between the lines of SUVs and sedans like a shark through smaller fish. A McLaren. Not just any sports car, but a 720S, a $250,000 piece of machinery that screamed more with its whispered engine than any roaring muscle car ever could. Brittner's back straightened slightly against the seat. His mind, a well-oiled machine of local knowledge and ingrained bias, began to click through its logic. Nobody who lived here, in these sprawling houses with perfect lawns, drove a car like that. The rich doctors and lawyers, they went for the flashy Italian stuff, the red Ferraris you could see a mile away. This was different. This was a statement meant to be understood only by those who knew. And the man behind the wheel, visible now as the car slowed for a light, was young. Maybe mid-30s. He had a close-cut beard, sharp cheekbones, and wore a simple but expensive-looking Navy suit. His hands on the steering wheel were relaxed. His posture controlled Dot to Brittner. The pieces formed a picture he felt he'd seen 100 times before. A car like that, with a young black man driving it in this zip code on a Thursday afternoon. The math, in his head, never added up to anything legal. It pointed to drugs. It pointed to fraud. It pointed to a stolen vehicle with cloned plates. It never, ever pointed to a man just driving home. A flicker of something moved in Brickner's chest. Not quite anger, but a solid, self-righteous certainty. He was sure he was about to do some real police work, to peel back the shiny surface and find the rot underneath. He waited until the light turned green and the McLaren moved off with a smooth electric surge. No squealing tires, no showboating. Just pure, effortless power. That control, to Brittner, felt like arrogance. He pulled his cruiser out into traffic, letting a few cars get between them. He ran the plate through his computer. The seconds ticked by. The result came back, clean. Registered to a corporate entity, some LLC with a generic name. Brittner's lips pressed into a thin line. A shell company. Of course. That's how they did it. He felt a surge of vindication. The clean plate wasn't proof of innocence. It was proof of sophistication. This was a bigger fish. He hit the lights. The blue and red flashes splashed across the McLaren's dark rear end. In his mirror, he saw the driver's head tilt slightly, a small, controlled movement. The car signaled and glided perfectly onto the wide shoulder beneath the shade of a large oak tree. Brickner took his time. He called in the stop, his voice a low gravel over the radio. Unit 7, traffic stop, black McLaren on Ridgeview. Running a check. He adjusted his hat in the mirror, the broad brim casting a shadow over his eyes. This was the part where he set the tone. He stepped out into the humid air, the weight of his belt a familiar comfort. He approached the driver's side with the deliberate, swaying walk of someone who owned the stretch of pavement. He could see the driver now, looking straight ahead, hands visible at 10 and 2 on the wheel. The window slid down silently. The first thing that struck Brittner was the quiet. No loud music bleeding out. No smell of weed or cheap air freshener. The interior smelled of clean leather and cool air. The second thing was the man's calm. He turned his head, his eyes hidden behind a pair of sleek, tinted glasses. "Afternoon," Brickner said, his voice not unfriendly, but flat. "All business." You know why I stopped you? The driver's head gave a single slight shake. No, officer, I don't. His voice was even deep and carried no trace of nervousness. It sounded educated. To Brickner, it sounded practiced. Your rear registration plate frame, Brickner said, gesturing vaguely with his flashlight. It's obstructed. Can't see the state name at the bottom. License and registration, please. The driver's mouth twitched just for an instant. It wasn't a smile. It was the look of a man who had just heard a very old, very transparent line. But he didn't argue. He moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into the center console and then to the sun visor. He produced a small leather folder and a single sheet of paper. He handed them out the window. Brickner took them, his fingers brushing against the cool, high-quality paper of the registration. The license photo looked back at him. A serious face. The name was uncommon. The address was in the city, a good neighborhood. But not this neighborhood. Wait here, Brickner said, and turned back to his cruiser dot in the front seat. The air conditioning humming, he stared at the documents. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was technically wrong. But every instinct in his body screamed. The corporate registration. The city address. The sheer, unbelievable cost of the car. The man's detached calm. It all fit a pattern Brickner had spent his career assembling in his mind. The pattern of someone who thought they were smarter than the law, who used money and paperwork to hide in plain sight. He got back on the radio. Dispatch, I've got the documents, but I've got a feeling on this one. The reg is under a business. Driver's address doesn't match the locale for the vehicle. Requesting a deeper check for stolen. May be flagged for fraud. And send me a second unit. Might need a tow for an illegal modification inspection. He sat and watched the McLaren in his rearview. The driver hadn't moved a muscle. He just sat there, a statue in a black carbon fiber cocoon, waiting. The sun dappled through the leaves of the oak tree, dancing shadows over the car's ruined matte finish. To Brickner, the man's patience was the most suspicious thing of all. A normal person, even a rich one, would be irritated. They'd be on their phone to a lawyer. They'd be sighing, checking their watch. This man was just waiting, like he had all the time in the world and knew something Brickner didn't. A familiar cruiser pulled up behind him. Officer Jenkins, a younger cop who still looked to Brickner for guidance. Brickner felt a swell of purpose. This wasn't just a ticket. This was a teaching moment. This was how you policed a community like Crestwood. You didn't just look at what was presented. You dug for what was hidden. He took a deep breath, his hand on the door handle. The game was on. He was going to peel back the layers of this guy's cool, wealthy act. He was going to find the truth he knew was lurking underneath. He stepped back out into the heat, the documents clutched in his hand, and walked toward the beautiful, ruined car with the calm, silent man inside, ready to turn a simple traffic stop into something much, much bigger. The air on the shoulder of the road felt thick and still. Officer Brickner walked back toward the McLaren, the driver's license and registration feeling flimsy in his hand. In his mind, they were just pieces of a clever puzzle, not proof of anything. He saw Officer Jenkins getting out of his cruiser behind him, a look of mild curiosity on his young face. Back up. Good. This might get interesting. He arrived at the driver's window, which was still down. The driver hadn't moved, his hand still resting on the wheel, his face turned forward, waiting. The tinted glasses made him impossible to read. Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle for me, Brickner said. His voice had lost its flat, business tone. It was lower now, carrying an edge of command. It was a tone that didn't expect a no. The driver slowly turned his head. Step out? For a license plate frame, officer? His voice was calm, but there was a new threat in it. A thread of cold clarity. Is that a lawful order? Brickner felt a flare in his gut. Challenge. He leaned a hand on the roof of the car, the carbon fiber feeling strangely light under his palm. The registration is under a business. Your address doesn't match. I have reasonable suspicion to conduct a brief search of the vehicle for evidence of fraud or stolen property. Now, please step out. He saw the man's jaw tighten, just a fraction. The driver took a slow breath, as if counting in his head. Officer, I am asking you to call a supervisor to the scene. Right now, before this proceeds any further. A supervisor. The words hit Brickner like a slap. This guy wasn't scared. He was following a script. A script guilty people used to delay, to cause problems. The request only cemented his certainty. He took a step back, his hand moving unconsciously toward his belt near his radio. Step out of the vehicle, sir. This is your last request before you are obstructing. For a long moment, nothing happened. The two men locked in a silent standoff, the expensive car between them. Then, with a smooth, unhurried motion, the driver reached down, pushed a button. The door clicked and then rose upward in a silent butterfly motion. He unfolded himself from the low seat, standing to his full height. He was tall, almost as tall as Brickner, and his suit jacket fell perfectly into place. He removed his glasses, folding them and tucking them into his inner pocket. His eyes were dark, watchful, and utterly without fear. Turn around and place your hands on the roof, please, Brickner instructed, his heart beating a little faster. This was it. The act was crumbling. The man complied, moving with a slow, deliberate grace that felt, to Brickner, like more defiance. He placed his palms flat on the warm roof of his own car. Brickner began a pat-down. The fabric of the suit was fine wool, smooth under his hands. He felt no weapons, no bulges of any kind. Just the solid frame of a man in good shape. It was frustratingly clean. Behind him, Jenkins stood by, watching the traffic, looking a bit unsure. Am I being detained, officer? The man asked, his voice muffled slightly as he faced the car. You are being detained for the duration of the vehicle search, Brickner replied, stepping back. Jenkins, stay with him. I'm going to have a look. He walked to the passenger side, opened the door, the handle was hidden, and he fumbled for a second, which annoyed him, and peered inside. The interior was minimalist. No wrappers, no receipts, no personal items at all. Just the smell of leather and a faint, clean scent. He opened the glove box. Empty, save for the vehicle manual in a leather pouch. The center console held only a charging cable. It was the cleanest car he'd ever seen. It looked like a showroom model, not a car that was driven. His frustration was curdling into anger. This guy was good. He'd sanitized everything, but he couldn't sanitize the car itself. Brickner walked back to the front. The tow truck he'd called was rumbling down the shoulder, a big yellow flatbed with flashing yellow lights. Its arrival made things feel more official, more serious. The driver heard it and turned his head. A tow truck? For a license plate frame? His calm was finally starting to show a crack, a hint of sharp, cold anger underneath. The vehicle may have illegal modifications, Brickner said, reciting the line he'd prepared. It needs to be impounded for a full inspection. That is a $250,000 federal asset, the man said, his words clear and clipped. You do not have the authority to tow it. Brickner almost laughed. Federal asset. That was a new one. A desperate lie from a cornered man. Just stand there, sir. We'll sort it out at the yard. The tow truck driver, a burly man with a stained cap, hopped down. That's the one, huh? Sweet ride. Gonna be tricky to load. Brickner made a decision. He didn't want the driver behind the wheel, maybe trying to flee or damage evidence. and a small, mean part of him wanted to show this confident man who was in control. "I'll move it onto the flatbed," Brickner announced. The driver's head whipped around. "Officer, do not get in that car. You are not qualified to operate it. You will damage it." The warning, delivered with such absolute certainty, felt like gasoline on Brickner's smoldering pride. "I think I can handle the car, son." He turned to the tow truck driver. "Get it ready." He walked back to the open driver's side door and looked in. The seat was shaped like a bucket, low to the floor. The steering wheel was small. There was no gear shifter he could see, just a cluster of buttons. His confidence wavered for a second, but he couldn't back down now, not with Jenkins and the tow guy watching. He squeezed himself in, his utility belt cramping awkwardly against the deep seat. The door, not knowing how to close it, he left it up in the air. The interior felt alien. The dashboard was all screens. He found what looked like an ignition button and pressed it. The car didn't start with a roar. It woke up with a digital chime and a low, liquid hum from behind him. The screens lit up, showing a maze of information. He looked for a gear selector. He saw a button marked A for automatic and pressed it. Nothing happened. The tow truck driver had angled the flatbed and lowered its ramp. "Anytime you're ready, officer." He called out. Flustered, Brickner pressed another button. A small lever behind the steering wheel clicked. He assumed it was for the gears. He pulled it toward him. He saw a D light up on a screen. Good. Drive. He took his foot off the strange. Heavy brake pedal and touched the accelerator. Just a tap. To creep forward toward the ramp. The car did not creep. The McLaren's accelerator was a hair trigger. The engine, a twin-turbo V8, was tuned for milliseconds of response. The tap that would have moved a normal car an inch sent a volcanic surge of power to the rear wheels. The car lunged forward with a terrifying, raw scream. Brickner's head snapped back. His stomach dropped. The world outside the windshield became a blur of yellow flatbed and green trees. He stomped on the brake, but in his panic, his heavy boot also slammed down on the accelerator again. The scream of the engine became a shriek. The front of the low-slung McLaren shot up the ramp and smashed, with a deafening crunch of carbon fiber and tearing metal, directly into the massive hydraulic winch on the back of the tow truck. The sound was like a gunshot followed by the rain of breaking glass and plastic dot. Then, silence, broken only by the pinging of hot metal and the hiss of escaping coolant from the McLaren's shattered front end. Brickner sat, stunned, the seatbelt he hadn't fastened digging into his shoulder from the impact. The airbag hadn't gone off. The impact was too low, too angled. He could smell gasoline and hot oil. The beautiful, matte black front of the car was a crumpled nightmare. Its headlights smashed, its hood bent into a twisted sculpture. He fumbled to turn the car off. The engine died, leaving an eerie quiet. He climbed out, his legs shaky. He looked up. The driver was standing exactly where he'd been left, Jenkins's hand still lightly on his arm. But Jenkins wasn't looking at the driver anymore. He was staring, mouth slightly open, at the wreck. The driver's face was a mask of stone. His dark eyes moved slowly from the wreck of his car to Brickner's pale, shocked face, and then back to the wreck. There was no outrage, no yelling. The calm was back, but it was deeper now, colder than ice. It was the calm of a man who has just seen a terrible, irreversible mistake be made, and who knows, with absolute certainty, what comes next. He slowly, deliberately, shrugged off Jenkins's slackened grip. He didn't look at the young officer. He kept his eyes locked on Brickner, his heart hammering against his ribs, tried to find his voice, tried to find the authority that had been there just a minute ago. The brakes, he started, the words hollow and stupid even to his own ears. They gave out. The driver didn't even acknowledge the lie. He took a single slow step forward. The game was over. The peeling back was done. And what was underneath was not what Brickner had expected at all. The silence after the crash felt heavy, like a physical thing pressing down on everyone's shoulders. The only sounds were the ticking of cooling metal from the McLaren and the distant hum of traffic that hadn't stopped, that hadn't seen their little world fall apart on the shoulder. Officer Brickner stood beside the ruined car, his face pale. He could feel the heat coming off the crumpled carbon fiber. He could smell the sharp, acrid stench of spilled fluids. His hands felt empty and useless at his sides. He looked from the wreck to the driver, who had taken that one step forward. The man's stone-like face was more terrifying than any shout of anger would have been. Jenkins, the younger officer, finally found his voice. It came out as a cough. "Holy. Are you okay, Dale?" Brickner just nodded, unable to speak. His mind was racing, a blur of panic looking for an exit. The brakes. He had to stick with the brakes. It was the only way. A mechanical failure. An accident. Not his fault. The driver ignored Jenkins completely. His eyes, dark and unwavering, stayed locked on Brickner. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, measured, and cut through the thick air like a knife. "Officer Brickner." He said the name with a cold clarity, having read it on the nameplate during the stop. "You have just compromised a federal asset. You are standing in an active crime scene that you created." The words didn't make sense at first. They bounced off Brickner's panic. Asterisk federal asset. Crime scene, asterisk cop words. This guy was using cop words to sound important. "What are you talking about?" Brickner managed, finding a thread of his old authority, but it sounded weak, defensive. The driver didn't answer. Instead, he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he reached his right hand toward the inside of his suit jacket. "Hands!" Jenkins barked, instinctively, his own hand going to his sidearm. The movement broke the strange spell. The driver stopped moving, his hand still inside his jacket. He turned his head, just his head, toward Jenkins. The look he gave the younger officer was one of pure, icy patience, like a teacher looking at a child who has just interrupted with something foolish. "Officer," he said, his voice still calm, "I am retrieving my credentials. Do not make this worse than it already is." He looked back at Brickner, as if he were the only one who mattered now. Tell him to stand down, now. Something in the man's absolute certainty, the sheer command in his quiet tone, cut through Brickner's fog. This was not the voice of a scared hustler. This was something else entirely. A cold dread began to pool in Brickner's stomach, colder than the shock of the crash. "Jenkins." "Wait," Brickner heard himself say. The driver gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He continued his motion, smooth and controlled. From the inner pocket of his suit jacket, he withdrew a slim black leather wallet. He flipped it open with one hand, his thumb expertly sliding a badge into view. It was a shield. Not a police badge. It was the badge of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Held next to it, in a clear window, was a credential card with the man's photo. The same serious face from the driver's license. But here it was official. Below the photo were the words, "Special Agent." Brickner's eyes locked onto the badge. The world seemed to tilt sideways. The sounds of the traffic faded into a dull roar in his ears. He felt his mouth go dry. He couldn't breathe. It was like a trapdoor had opened beneath his feet. The driver, no. The federal agent let the silence hang for a long moment, letting the realities sink in. He then spoke, each word precise and clear. "Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation." This vehicle was registered to a shell corporation controlled by a target in a multi-jurisdictional racketeering investigation. It contained 4 separate tracking and audio surveillance devices. The data from those devices was being actively monitored. He paused, his eyes never leaving Brickner's, until approximately 90 seconds ago, when you wrecked the primary collection point for that investigation. Jenkins had taken a step back, his hand away from his weapon, his face a mask of pure, unvarnished horror. He looked from the wrecked car to the badged Brickner, understanding the monumental scale of what had just happened. The agent finally lowered his credentials. You have detained a federal officer without cause. You have destroyed government property valued in excess of $250,000. And you have potentially compromised an investigation that has been active for 18 months. He said it all without raising his voice. The facts themselves were the accusation. You will both secure this scene. You will call your supervisor and your chief of police. You will tell them to contact the FBI field office immediately. You will not touch anything else on this vehicle. Am I understood? Brickner could only nod. The cocky certainty that had filled him just minutes before was gone, completely hollowed out. In its place was a yawning, sickening emptiness. He saw his career, his pension, his reputation, all crumbling like the front end of that car. He saw the lawsuits, the headlines, the internal affairs interviews. His throat was too tight to speak. The agent saw his nod. He turned his gaze to Jenkins. Officer, your radio. Call it in. Use the words federal agent and compromised investigation. Do it now. Jenkins, shaken but functional, fumbled for his shoulder radio. His voice cracked as he began to speak. Dispatch, this is Unit 9. We have a situation at the traffic stop on Ridgeview. We need the supervisor and the chief. Immediately, we have a federal agent on scene. The vehicle it's federal. The investigation is compromised. As Jenkins's voice crackled over the radio, the agent finally moved away from them. He walked a few paces toward the ruined front of his car. He didn't look angry. He looked like a scientist surveying a catastrophic lab accident. He knelt down, careful not to touch the dripping fluids, and peered into the mangled cavity where the front end used to be. He was looking for something specific. The tiny, expensive electronics that were now just shattered plastic and wire. He stood up, brushed a speck of dirt from his knee, and sighed. It was the first truly human sound he'd made since getting out of the car. It wasn't a sigh of sadness, but of profound, weary frustration. The kind a man makes when months of careful, patient work is undone in one stupid, avoidable second. He walked back to where Brickner stood, rooted to the spot. The agent stopped very close to him, closer than was comfortable. Brickner could smell the clean scent of his wool suit, could see the fine stitching on his lapel dot in a voice so low only Brickner could hear it. The agent finally let a sliver of his personal feeling show. All you saw was the car? He said, his words barely a whisper. And the color of the man driving it. He didn't wait for a response. He turned his back on Officer Dale Brickner, pulled out a cell phone from his pocket, and walked toward the shade of the oak tree. He began to speak into the phone, his voice calm and professional again. Sir, it's me. We have a problem. The cover vehicle is destroyed. Yes, by a local patrol officer. No, I am not injured. The scene is contained, but the asset is total loss. The op is blown. Brickner listened to the one-sided conversation, each word a nail in the coffin of his old life. He looked at his own hands, the hands that had gripped that steering wheel. He looked at Jenkins, who couldn't meet his eyes. He looked at the tow truck driver, who was just staring, a spectator to a professional disaster, and he looked at the special agent, standing under the tree, already working the problem, already in the world of consequences that Brickner had just blindly crashed into. The waiting was over. The real trouble had just begun. The minutes that followed felt like hours, each one stretching out in the afternoon heat. The traffic on Ridgeview continued to flow, but now drivers slowed to a crawl, their eyes wide as they took in the bizarre scene. The wrecked supercar, the 2 patrol cars, the tow truck, and the 3 men standing in a silent, tense triangle. Officer Jenkins stayed by his cruiser, speaking in a low, urgent voice into his radio, repeating the words federal agent and FBI like a mantra he'd just learned. His face was flushed, and he kept glancing at Brickner with a look that was equal parts pity and fear. Brickner himself was statue still. The agent's final whispered sentence played on a loop in his head. Asterisk, all you saw was the car, and the color of the man driving it. Asterisk, the words burned, because they were true. He had seen a costume, a prop in a story he'd written in his own mind. He never saw the man. And now that man was on the phone, and Brickner was just a problem to be managed. The first new arrival wasn't a supervisor, but a news helicopter. It appeared as a distant thumping, growing louder until it was circling overhead, its camera no doubt zooming in on the exotic wreck. The agent looked up at it, his expression tightening with fresh annoyance. He spoke another few words into his phone, and then put it away. Then the cavalry arrived, but not the kind Brickner expected or wanted. 2 unmarked sedans, dark and sleek, pulled onto the shoulder, followed closely by the chief of police's own car, its lights flashing. Men and women in neat, casual clothes, polo shirts, khakis, dark windbreakers, despite the heat piled out. They moved with a quiet, efficient purpose that was different from police. They were federal agents. One of them, a woman with her hair in a severe ponytail, went straight to the special agent. They spoke briefly. He nodded toward the wreck, then toward Brickner. Her eyes followed his gesture and landed on Brickner with a look of cold, professional assessment. No anger, just a quick categorization. Liability. The chief, a large man named Gerald who Brickner had known for years, stormed over. His face was a dangerous shade of red. He bypassed the agents entirely and went straight to Brickner. Brickner, my office now. His voice was a low growl, meant only for him. Before Brickner could move or speak, the special agent stepped forward. Chief, he said, his tone polite but utterly firm, leaving no room for argument. Officer Brickner and Officer Jenkins are material witnesses to the destruction of federal property and the compromise of an investigation. They will need to give immediate statements to the Office of Professional Responsibility. They are not to discuss this incident with anyone until that is complete. The chief blinked, turning his anger from his officer to this new complication. This is my department, Agent. It's my crime scene, Chief, the agent replied, not giving his name. As of 90 minutes ago, your officers are involved. The FB, I will take the lead on the federal portion. Your Internal Affairs Division can liaise with us. But Officer Brickner does not go to your office. He goes with Agent Cole here. He gestured to the woman with the ponytail. She will take his statement and his equipment. Brickner felt a fresh wave of nausea. Take his equipment, his gun, his badge, his belt. It was the first, formal step toward being stripped of everything. The chief opened his mouth to protest, looked at the gathering crowd of feds, at the news helicopter, and closed it. He gave a stiff, furious nod. Fine, Jenkins, you too. Brickner, do exactly as they say. The look he gave Brickner then was one of profound disappointment. It was worse than anger. Agent Cole approached. Officer Brickner, please come with me. She led him to one of the unmarked sedans. It was clean and smelled of stale coffee. Your duty weapon, your badge, and your department-issued phone, please. His hands trembled as he unsnapped his holster, handed over the heavy pistol. He unpinned the shield from his uniform, the metal feeling suddenly cheap and unimportant. He gave her his phone. Each item felt like a piece of his identity being removed. "Sit in the back," she instructed. He did. She got in the driver's seat, started the car, and turned on the air conditioning. She didn't drive away. She took out a digital recorder and a notepad. "This is an informal preliminary statement. Start from the moment you first saw the vehicle. Do not omit anything." And so, in the cool, quiet back seat of a government car, Dale Brickner began to tell his story. His voice was a monotone. He talked about the McLaren, the license plate, the corporate registration. He tried to explain his reasonable suspicion. The words, which had felt so solid and right in his own head, now sounded thin and hollow spoken aloud. When he got to the part about moving the car, his voice almost failed him. "I was attempting to assist with the tow," he said, the lie tasting like ash. "The brakes. They just seemed to fail." Agent Cole didn't look up from her notepad. She didn't call him a liar. She just wrote. "And when Special Agent Adams identified himself and warned you not to operate the vehicle, what was your reasoning for ignoring that direct warning from a federal officer?" Special Agent Adams. So that was his name. Brickner hadn't even known it until now. I didn't believe him," Brickner admitted, the truth finally forced out of him. "I thought he was just saying that to stop me." "I see," Agent Cole said, her pen scratching. That was all. "I see." Outside, the scene was transforming. The local news van had arrived, its satellite dish rising into the air. More FBI agents had cordoned off the area with yellow tape that said, "FBI, crime scene, do not cross." They were treating the wrecked McLaren like evidence in a bombing, photographing it from every angle, carefully bagging pieces of shattered debris. The tow truck driver was being interviewed by two serious-looking men. Special Agent Adams was in the center of it all, but he wasn't dealing with the car anymore. He was speaking with a man in a suit who had just arrived, an older man who carried an air of clear authority. Adams was gesturing, explaining, his face serious. The older man listened, then rubbed his forehead, looking at the car with an expression of pure exasperation. This was his boss. The cost of this mistake was climbing by the second, measured not just in dollars, but in lost evidence, lost time, and sheer bureaucratic nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, Agent Cole finished her notes. "Wait here," she said, and got out to confer with the older suit. Brickner watched through the window. He saw the chief talking to a public information officer, both of them looking grimly at the news van. He saw Jenkins sitting in the other FBI sedan, his head in his hands. He saw Special Agent Adams accept a bottle of water from another agent, drink deeply, his eyes sweeping over the organized chaos. For a second, those eyes met Brickner's through the car window. There was no triumph there, no gloating, just a flat, exhausted acknowledgement. They were both stuck in this disaster now, for very different reasons. Agent Cole came back and got in the driver's seat. She didn't start the car. She half-turned to look at him. "You'll be driven home. You are on administrative leave, effective immediately. Do not speak to the media. Do not discuss this with anyone except your union representative or the investigators assigned. You will be contacted by the Office of Professional Responsibility for a formal interview. Your department will also conduct its own internal affairs investigation." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Officer Brickner, you need to understand the seriousness of this. This isn't a fender bender. The Department of Justice does not look kindly on the destruction of its assets. There will be a financial reckoning. And there will be other inquiries. Other inquiries. He knew what that meant. Civil rights, profiling, a federal review of his stop history. They were going to take his career apart piece by piece and they were going to do it under a microscope. Can I say something to him? Brickner heard himself ask, the question surprising even him. Agent Cole followed his gaze to Adams. She seemed to consider it, then gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It's not recommended. Anything you say could be construed as an attempt to influence a witness or interfere. It's best to just go home. She started the car and pulled away from the curb, away from the flashing lights, the crowd, the wreckage of the black car. Brickner didn't look back. He stared straight ahead at the empty street, feeling the unfamiliar lightness of his uniform, where his gun and badge used to be. The cool air from the vents chilled the sweat on his neck. The ride home was completely silent. The world outside looked normal, but everything had changed. The waiting was over. The storm had arrived. The silence in his own house was the loudest thing Officer Dale Brickner had ever heard. The familiar creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock in the hallway, they all screamed at him. He had been sitting in his living room chair for hours, still in his uniform shirt, the empty spots on his belt feeling like open wounds. The news had broken by dinner time. He didn't have to turn on the TV. His phone buzzed relentlessly with texts from fellow officers, most of them just saying, "You okay?" or "Call me," which he knew was a bad idea. A few from older guys just said, "Damn." One from a buddy in another precinct had a link. The headline said it all. Crestwood officer wrecks FBI surveillance car during stop. Profiling alleged. He didn't click it. He knew what was in there. They'd have the helicopter footage. They'd have statements from sources close to the investigation. They'd be digging into his past. He sat in the gathering dark, replaying the stop frame by frame, looking for the moment he could have turned back, the moment he could have just written a warning and driven away. He could never find it. The days that followed were a blur of dread and procedure. He met with his union representative, a weary man named Phil, who kept sighing. "Dale, this is bad. The feds aren't playing. They want their money, and the department isn't going to shield you on this one. The optics are a nightmare." He gave his formal statement to Internal Affairs, with the department lawyer and Phil in the room. He stuck to the story about the breaks for about 5 minutes before the EA captain. A woman with tired eyes slid a glossy photograph across the table. It was a close-up of the McLaren's undamaged rear brake rotor and caliper. Gleaming and perfect, the forensic mechanics report finds no pre-existing mechanical failure. "Officer Brickner," she said quietly, "let's try this again." So he told the truth. The whole, ugly, arrogant truth. It didn't make him feel better. It just made it official. Weeks bled into a month. The city, wanting to avoid a devastating lawsuit and a blistering consent decree from the Justice Department, moved fast. The announcement came in a terse press release. Officer Dale Brickner was resigning from the Crestwood Police Department, effective immediately. There would be no disciplinary hearing, no public trial. It was a quiet, administrative death. In exchange, the city would cover the cost of the destroyed vehicle in a settlement with the federal government. The amount was never publicly disclosed, but Phil told him in a hushed voice it was more than the car was even worth. A nuisance fee to make the FBI go away. On his last official day, a Tuesday, he had to go to the station to clean out his locker and turn in the rest of his gear. He went in the back entrance early to avoid people. The few officers he saw gave him tight, brief nods, then looked away quickly. He was a ghost already. He emptied his locker-old energy bar wrappers, a spare pair of socks, a faded picture of his daughter from grade school. He put it all in a small cardboard box. He handed over his uniforms, his locker key, his department ID dot as he was walking out, box in hand. Through the parking lot he'd crossed 1,000 times. He saw him, Special Agent Adams was getting out of a car. Not a supercar. A perfectly ordinary dark blue government sedan. He was wearing a similar suit, maybe the same one. He was there for a meeting, probably to finalize the paperwork on the settlement, to officially close the loop on the Crestwood incident. They saw each other at the same time. 50 feet of cracked asphalt stretched between them. Brickner stopped, his feet feeling rooted to the ground. Adams paused, one hand on his car door. For a long moment, they just stood there in the gray morning light. Brickner expected to feel a surge of hatred. This man had ended his life. But looking at him now, he didn't see a triumphant villain. He saw a professional who had had a critical tool broken by a careless stranger. He looked frankly tired. There were lines near his eyes that Brickner didn't remember from the side of the road. Adams closed his car door. He didn't walk toward Brickner, but he didn't walk away either. He just stood waiting. An invitation or a challenge, Brickner couldn't tell. Swallowing hard, Brickner walked toward him. Each step felt heavy. He stopped a few feet away. The box in his hands felt like a shield. "Agent," Brickner said. His voice was rough from disuse. "Officer," Adams replied. His tone was neutral. Not friendly, not hostile. "It's not officer anymore," Brickner said, glancing down at the box. "As of today." Adams gave a small, slow nod. He knew. "I heard." The silence came back. Brickner had thought about this moment, what he might say. An apology? An excuse? A curse? Now that he was here, all the words seemed pointless. "Your investigation," Brickner finally managed. Did I wreck that too?" Adams looked at him, really looked at him, as if weighing whether to answer. The target was alerted. The cover was blown. We had to pivot, use other methods. It cost time. It cost resources. He shrugged, a small professional gesture. We adapted. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a factual report. The world had kept turning. The FBI had moved on. Brickner was the only one whose world had stopped. "I was wrong," Brickner said. The words were simple, and they cost him everything that was left. That day, "I was just wrong." Adams didn't nod or smile. He absorbed the statement. His eyes flicked to the police station behind Brickner, then back to his face. "What you did," he said, choosing his words with care, "was see a prop, a car, a costume. You didn't see a person. You saw a character in a story you told yourself. That story? It makes you blind." He wasn't shouting about race. He was talking about something colder, more procedural. A fatal error in observation. It was worse. "I know that now," Brickner whispered. "Knowing it now," Adams said, his voice still quiet, "doesn't fix the car. It doesn't get the evidence back." He paused. "But it's the only thing that might stop you from doing it again. To someone who doesn't have a badge to show you when you've gone too far." He glanced at his watch, a subtle signal that the conversation, this strange moment of reckoning in a parking lot, was over. He had meetings to attend. He had a job to do. Brickner just stood there, holding his box of old socks and a child's photograph. Adams took a step toward the station, then paused. He didn't look back, but he spoke one last time. His voice so low Brickner almost missed it. The brakes didn't fail. "Dale." And then he walked away, his steps crisp and even on the pavement. Heading into the building without a backward glance, Brickner stood there for a long time, until the chill of the morning seeped through his jacket. He looked at the ordinary sedan Adams had arrived in. No flash, no roar. Just a tool for a job. He thought of the incredible machine he'd crushed, now just a crushed piece of evidence in some warehouse. He finally turned and walked to his own personal car, an old sedan with a dented fender. He placed the cardboard box carefully on the passenger seat. He didn't look back at the station either. He started the car and drove away, not sure where he was going. The road ahead was just a road now, not a place to hunt for disconnects. Every car was just a car. Every person behind a wheel was just a person, with a story he would never know. The weight of that, the sheer, terrifying responsibility of it, settled on him for the first time. It was a heavier burden than his gun belt ever was, and he was just beginning to learn how to carry it.